Hey everyone. Okay, wait, let me start again. I practiced this intro like 10 times this morning and now my mind is just blank, which is actually perfect because that is exactly what we are going to talk about today. Welcome to Speak with Vivi. I'm Vivi and this is our very first episode. And I want to start by asking you something. Have you ever been in a moment, a real moment, where you needed your English and it just disappeared? Like you opened your mouth and nothing came out. Maybe it was a job interview. Maybe it was a meeting at work. Maybe it was just someone on the street asking you for directions. And your brain, the same brain that understands movies, that reads articles, that studied English for years, just shut down completely. That feeling, I know it. I know it so well. And today, we are going to talk about why that happens and what you can actually do about it. But first, let me introduce someone very important. He is my English teacher, my conversation partner, and honestly, one of the most patient human beings I have ever met in my life. Robert, say hello.
Ha! Patient. That's a kind word for it. I'd say I'm just very entertained. Hey everyone, I'm Robert. I'm from the United States, and I have been teaching English for about 8 years now. And I have to say, working with Vivi has been one of the most interesting experiences of my career.
Is that a compliment?
Absolutely. Mostly.
I'll take it. Okay, Robert, before we get into today's topic, I want to tell our listeners something. This podcast, Speak with Vivi, it was born from a very real place, from my own frustration, from my own fear, because I have been studying English for a long time, and for a long time I thought the problem was vocabulary, or grammar, or pronunciation.
But it wasn't any of those things, was it?
No, it really wasn't. The problem was something much deeper, and I think millions of people are dealing with the same thing right now, and they don't even know what to call it.
And that's exactly why this episode matters so much, especially as our very first one. Because if you're listening right now, there's a good chance you've felt this. That moment when your English just shuts down.
Okay, so let's get into it. Robert, I want to start with my own story because I think people need to hear this.
Please, go ahead.
So, a few years ago, I had a job interview in English, and I had prepared so much. I practiced my answers. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I even recorded myself the night before and thought, okay, Vivi, you've got this.
That sounds like solid preparation.
It was, on paper, but then I walked into that room, and the interviewer looked at me and said, very nicely, by the way, so tell me a little bit about yourself.
The classic question.
The most classic question in the world. A question I had answered probably 50 times in practice. And you know what happened?
I have a feeling I know.
My mind went completely white, not blank, white, like someone turned off all the lights and then turned on a very bright, very empty spotlight. And I just sat there, smiling like this,
Oh no.
for what felt like 10 years. And then I said, and I will never forget this, I said, I am a person.
You said I am a person.
I said I am a person to a job interviewer who was also clearly a person.
I mean, it's not wrong.
It is not wrong, but it is also not a great answer for a job interview. And I remember walking out of that building and just feeling so embarrassed and confused. Because I knew the answer. I had practiced the answer. So why couldn't I say it?
And that right there, that question you just asked, is the heart of today's episode. Because what happened to you in that interview room happens to millions of English learners every single day. And most people think it means their English is bad.
But it doesn't mean that, right?
It absolutely does not. And I want to spend today really breaking down what's actually happening in those moments. Because once you understand it, everything changes.
Okay. So, Robert, as the teacher here, explain it to me. And to everyone listening, why does our English shut down when we need it most?
Great question. So let's start with the brain, because this is actually a neuroscience issue as much as it is a language issue.
Ooh, neuroscience. I love when you say big words because then I can ask what they mean and it's actually good for the podcast.
Ha! Perfect. So, neuroscience is just the study of the brain and how it works. And here's what's happening when you freeze in English. Your brain has two main systems that are relevant here. The first one is what I like to call the thinking brain. This is the part of your brain that is logical, organized, and in control. It's where your learned knowledge lives, including your English.
So, my vocabulary, my grammar, everything I studied, that's in the thinking brain?
Exactly. Now, the second system is what scientists call the amygdala, but I like to call it the alarm system.
The alarm system. Okay,
The amygdala is the part of your brain that detects danger. Its whole job is to protect you. And when it senses a threat, real or imagined, it sends a signal to your whole body. Heart starts racing, palms get sweaty, breathing gets shallow.
oh, I know this feeling very well.
And here's the critical part. When the alarm system activates, it actually reduces access to your thinking brain. It's like the alarm system says, okay, we're in danger. We don't have time for logic right now. Just survive.
So, my brain thinks a job interview is dangerous.
Your brain thinks any high-pressure social situation is potentially dangerous, because for thousands of years, being judged by other people was actually a matter of survival. If your tribe rejected you, you were in real trouble.
So, my brain is trying to protect me from the job interviewer.
Exactly. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a lion chasing you and a job interviewer asking you to introduce yourself. Both feel like threats. Both trigger the alarm system. And when the alarm goes off,
The thinking brain shuts down.
the thinking brain gets quieter. Your English, which lives in the thinking brain, becomes much harder to access.
This is actually making me feel so much better about saying, I am a person.
You should feel better, because it wasn't a language failure. It was a brain protection response.
Okay, but Robert, here's what I don't understand. Because sometimes I speak English and I'm totally fine. Like right now, I'm speaking and I'm not freezing. So why does it happen in some situations and not others?
That is such a smart observation, and the answer is stress. Specifically, the level of perceived stress in the situation.
Perceived stress. Say more about that.
Perceived means how you see something, how you interpret it. So, right now, talking with me on this podcast, what's the stress level for you?
Honestly, maybe a 4 out of 10. I'm a little nervous because it's our first episode, but mostly I feel comfortable.
And why do you feel comfortable?
Because I trust you, and I know that if I make a mistake, you're not going to judge me, and I feel like I'm in a safe space.
Perfect. Safe space. Remember that phrase. Now think about that job interview. What was the stress level?
1,000 out of 10,
Ha! And why?
because everything felt like it was on the line, like this person was going to decide my future based on every single word I said. And my English had to be perfect, and I couldn't make any mistakes, and
And there it is. My English had to be perfect. That thought right there. That is the trigger.
the need for perfection triggers the alarm system.
The fear of imperfection triggers the alarm system. When you tell yourself, I cannot make a mistake right now, your brain hears that as danger, and the alarm goes off. And then
The English disappears.
the English becomes much harder to access. Yes,
This is wild. So the pressure I put on myself to speak perfectly is actually what makes me speak worse.
exactly. It's one of the most painful ironies of language learning. The more desperately you need your English to work, the harder it becomes to access it.
Okay, I need a moment with that because that is a lot to process.
Take your time.
So basically, trying too hard is part of the problem.
Trying too hard with the wrong focus. Yes, when your focus is on not making mistakes instead of on communicating, you create internal pressure. And that pressure activates the alarm system. And the alarm system makes it harder to think clearly.
So what should the focus be?
On connection, on meaning, on what you're trying to say, not on how perfectly you're saying it.
Easier said than done, Robert.
100%. Which is why we're going to spend the rest of this episode talking about how to actually do that.
Yes. But first, I want to ask you something because I know I'm not the only one with a freezing story. Do your students tell you about moments like this?
All the time. Every single week. And the stories are so similar it's almost heartbreaking. Because these are smart, capable, educated people. People who read English, who understand English, who have been studying for years. And they walk into a situation where they need to speak, and they feel like complete beginners again.
What are the most common situations where this happens?
Great question. So, from my experience, number one, without a doubt, is work situations. Job interviews, meetings, presentations, phone calls with international clients.
Oh, phone calls. Phone calls in English are a special kind of torture
Why do you think phone calls feel harder than face to face conversations?
because you can't see the person's face. You can't use body language to understand them. And you can't use body language to help them understand you. It's just voices. And if you don't catch something, you have to ask them to repeat. And then you feel embarrassed.
Exactly right. Phone calls remove all the visual context that helps us communicate. So the brain has to work harder. And when the brain is working harder,
There's more room for the alarm system to kick in.
you're getting this very fast.
I've lived this very deeply.
Huh, fair enough. So phone calls are number one in the work category. Number two, social situations, parties, events, meeting new people.
This one I understand so well, because in a party, in theory, there's no pressure. It's casual, it's fun. But then someone starts talking to you in English, and suddenly you feel like you're back in the job interview.
Why do you think that happens in social situations?
I think because you want them to like you want to make a good impression, you want to seem intelligent and interesting. And the fear of seeming stupid in another language is very real.
And again, that fear, that's the trigger. I need to seem intelligent creates pressure. Pressure activates the alarm. Alarm shuts down the English.
It's always the same cycle, isn't it?
Always. What are other situations where you personally have frozen?
Oh, so many. Ordering food at a restaurant when it's not what I expected. Like I ordered something and then they asked me a follow-up question I didn't expect, and I just pointed at the menu.
Classic.
At a doctor's appointment. That one was really scary because I needed to explain exactly how I was feeling, and the words just weren't coming. And I remember thinking, this is the worst possible moment to not have words,
Medical situations are incredibly stressful even in your native language.
right? And then multiply that by having to do it in English. Another one, when someone speaks very fast and I don't understand, and I've already asked them to repeat twice, and I'm too embarrassed to ask a third time, so I just say yes and hope for the best.
Oh, the yes and hope for the best strategy. I've heard about this one.
It has led to some very interesting situations in my life.
I can imagine. So all of these, the interview, the phone call, the party, the restaurant, the doctor, they all have something in common. What is it?
They all feel unpredictable, like you can't fully prepare for them.
That's part of it. But I think the deeper common thread is stakes. Each situation feels like something important is on the line. Your career, your health, your social image, your dignity.
My dignity, yes, that one especially.
And when stakes are high, the alarm system is more likely to activate. Which means
Which means the situations where we most need our English are exactly the situations where our brain makes it hardest to access.
you just summarized the whole problem beautifully.
I've had a lot of personal research on this topic.
Huh. Okay, so now that we understand why this happens, let's talk about what we can actually do. Because I don't want our listeners to walk away from this episode just feeling like their brain is broken.
Because it's not broken,
It is absolutely not broken. It's actually working exactly as it was designed to work. The problem is just that the design wasn't made for modern situations like job interviews and international phone calls.
so how do we work with our brain instead of against it?
Let's go through some concrete strategies. Strategy number one, and this is the foundation of everything else: lower the stakes in your mind.
How do you lower the stakes? The stakes are real.
The stakes feel real. But here's the thing: your brain is almost always exaggerating how catastrophic a mistake would be. Let me ask you something. That job interview where you said, "I am a person," what actually happened after that?
The interviewer kind of laughed, and then she said, "Of course, tell me more." And actually, the rest of the interview went okay. I was so relaxed after that moment because I thought, well, I've already said the worst thing I could say.
Interesting. So the catastrophe you were afraid of?
Didn't happen. And actually, the embarrassing moment kind of broke the tension.
Exactly. And this is what research shows consistently. The consequences of making a mistake in English are almost never as bad as we imagine they will be. Most people are kind. Most people want to understand you. Most people are not sitting there judging your grammar.
They're just trying to have a conversation.
They're just trying to have a conversation. So, strategy 1. Before you enter a high-pressure English situation, ask yourself, what is the realistic worst-case scenario here? Not the catastrophic imagined one, the realistic one.
And usually the realistic worst case is much smaller than what our brain is telling us.
Much smaller. Strategy number 2. Breathe before you speak.
This sounds simple.
It sounds simple, but it is genuinely powerful. Here's the science. Deep breathing activates what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically the opposite of the alarm system.
The calm system.
Exactly. When you take 3 slow, deep breaths before a high-pressure moment, before the interview starts, before you answer the phone, before you open your mouth at the party, you are literally sending a signal to your brain that says, we are safe. You can think now.
So just breathing can actually reduce the freeze.
It can significantly reduce it. Yes, and the beautiful thing is nobody has to know you're doing it. You can take 3 deep breaths before answering a question and it just looks like you're thinking.
Which you are.
Which you are. Strategy number 3. Prepare phrases, not scripts.
Ooh, what's the difference?
A script is a full prepared answer, like you had before your job interview. The problem with scripts is that when something unexpected happens, when the interviewer asks a slightly different version of the question, the script breaks down, and then the alarm goes off.
Because the plan failed.
Exactly. But phrases are different. Phrases are short, flexible pieces of language that you can use in many situations. For example, that's a great question. Let me think for a moment.
Oh, I love this one. This buys you time.
It buys you time, it sounds natural, and it works in almost any situation. Other useful phrases. What I mean to say is, great for when you realize mid-sentence that you're going in the wrong direction.
I need this one so much.
Could you say that again more slowly? Removes the shame from asking for repetition. I know what I want to say, but I'm looking for the right word. Honest, human, relatable.
And it's something natives say too, right?
All the time. I say, what's the word? Probably 20 times a day. Strategy number 4. Practice in low-stakes situations first.
This is something you've told me many times.
Because it works. The brain learns through repetition, and you can train your brain to feel safer in English conversations by having lots of small, low-pressure conversations first.
Like this podcast.
Like this podcast. Every time you have a conversation in English where nothing terrible happens, where you make mistakes and the world doesn't end, you are retraining your alarm system. You're showing it evidence that English conversations are not dangerous.
So the more small conversations I have, the less my brain panics in the big ones.
Exactly. You're building what psychologists call a tolerance. You're desensitizing your alarm system to English conversations.
Okay, this makes so much sense. What's strategy number 5?
Strategy number 5. Embrace the mistake out loud.
What does that mean?
It means instead of trying to hide your mistakes or power through them hoping nobody noticed, you acknowledge them openly. For example, if you say a wrong word, instead of panicking internally, you just say, wait, that's not right. What I meant was...
And just correct yourself calmly.
Calmly. Because here's what happens when you do that. The other person sees that you are self-aware, that you care about communicating clearly, and that you're not afraid of imperfection. And that actually makes them trust you more.
Not less?
Not less. Vulnerability in communication builds connection. When you try to pretend you're perfect, people feel distance. When you're honest about your imperfections, people feel closer to you.
Okay, I want to talk about something that I think is really specific to Brazilian learners. And maybe to Latin learners in general, because I think we have a particular relationship with embarrassment.
Tell me more.
So in Brazil, and I think in many Latin cultures, there's this thing where making a mistake in front of people feels very public, very social. Like the embarrassment is not just personal, it's communal. Everyone saw, everyone knows. And that feeling of being exposed, it's very intense.
That's a really important cultural observation. And I think you're right that the social dimension of mistakes feels different in different cultures.
In America, for example, my impression is that people are more comfortable saying, I don't know, or I made a mistake publicly. Is that fair?
I think there's some truth to that. There's a cultural value in American culture around what we call owning your mistakes, being upfront about them rather than hiding them. And I think that does make it slightly easier to recover from public mistakes.
But for someone who grew up in a culture where public mistakes feel very exposing, how do you start to shift that?
Slowly, and with compassion for yourself. I think the first step is recognizing that the intensity of embarrassment you feel is not proportional to the actual severity of the mistake. You feel like everyone is staring and judging, but most people have already moved on.
The spotlight effect.
Exactly. Do you know about the spotlight effect?
I read about it once. It's this psychological thing where we think everyone is paying much more attention to us than they actually are.
Right. Research shows that people consistently overestimate how much others notice and remember their mistakes. We think we're under a spotlight, but most people are thinking about themselves.
They're too busy worrying about their own spotlight to watch ours.
Exactly. So when you make a mistake in English, in a meeting, at a party, in an interview, the audience in your head is much larger and more judgmental than the audience in reality.
This is actually really comforting.
It should be. Okay, I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier, the specific experience of freezing mid-sentence, because I think this deserves its own conversation.
Yes, because this is different from not starting. This is when you've started speaking and then suddenly, nothing. You're in the middle of a sentence and the word you need just vanishes.
This is called tip of the tongue phenomenon, and it happens to everyone, in every language. But in a second language, it happens more often, and the emotional reaction is more intense.
Because in your native language, when a word disappears, you know it will come back. You're not panicking. But in English, when the word disappears, the alarm says, "See, you don't really know English, you were pretending."
That internal voice. You were pretending. That's so common and so destructive.
Where does that voice come from?
From years of being evaluated on your English, from school tests where getting it wrong had consequences, from moments of embarrassment that your brain stored as warnings. Remember this. This is dangerous.
So our past experiences with English actually shape how our brain responds in present situations.
Deeply. Your brain is constantly using past experiences to predict future threats. If speaking English in public has felt humiliating before, your brain will flag similar situations as dangerous.
Even if the situation is completely different.
Even if the situation is completely different, the flag is there. The alarm is sensitive.
So how do we create new experiences, better experiences that teach the brain new things?
That's the work. And it doesn't happen overnight. But it starts with exactly what you're doing right now. Having conversations, making mistakes in low-pressure situations, surviving those mistakes, realizing the world didn't end.
And then slowly, the brain starts to learn, oh, this is actually okay.
Exactly. You're literally rewiring your brain's response to English through repeated positive experiences.
Robert, I want to ask you something that might be uncomfortable.
I'm ready.
Have you ever felt something like this? Not in English, obviously, but in any situation where you had to perform and your brain just stopped working?
Absolutely. My first time teaching a class, I completely forgot the lesson plan. I was standing in front of 20 students, and my mind just went empty.
What did you do?
I panicked internally for about 5 seconds, and then I said, you know what? Let's start with a question for you all. What do you already know about this topic?
You turned it around.
I bought myself time, and while they were answering, my brain came back online and I remembered what I was supposed to teach.
See, that's a strategy right there. When you freeze, ask the other person a question.
That's actually strategy number 6, and I didn't even plan to introduce it this way.
Ha! See, this is why real conversation is the best teacher.
It really is. So yes, strategy 6. When you freeze, redirect. Ask a question. Say, what do you think? Or, that's interesting, and what about you? This gives you time for your brain to recover without the other person even noticing you froze.
This is genius, because in a real conversation, showing interest in the other person is always good anyway.
Always. Nobody ever complained about someone asking too many genuine questions.
Okay, we've covered a lot today. I want to take a moment to just breathe and reflect.
Good idea.
Because I think what I'm taking away from this conversation is The freezing is not a sign that I'm bad at English. It's a sign that my brain is trying to protect me. And that's actually kind of beautiful in a strange way.
It is beautiful. Your brain loves you. It's just using very outdated software for a very modern situation.
I need to update my software.
Ha, exactly. And the update process is safe conversations, repeated exposure, compassion for yourself when mistakes happen, and remembering that connection matters more than perfection.
Always. Okay, I want to do something before we close. I want to talk directly to the person listening right now, because I know who you are. I was you. Maybe I still am you in some situations.
Go ahead.
If you are listening to this right now, maybe while you're commuting or doing dishes or lying in bed, I want you to know something. The fact that you understand this conversation, that is your English. That is real. That counts.
It absolutely counts.
You don't have to speak perfectly to be valuable. You don't have to sound like a native to deserve to be heard. Your voice, your accented, imperfect, still learning voice, has things to say that the world needs to hear.
And every conversation you have, even the ones where you freeze, even the ones where you say, I am a person to a job interviewer,
Please never let me forget that.
every single conversation is teaching your brain that English is safe, that you are safe. And slowly, slowly, the freezing happens less, the alarm gets quieter, and your English starts to flow.
It really does. I am living proof of that.
You are.
Okay, I think it's time for our final thoughts. Robert, one last thing you want to leave with our listeners today.
Just this. The problem was never your English. It was never your vocabulary or your grammar or your accent. The problem was fear. And fear can be faced. Fear can be reduced. Fear is not permanent. Your English is already there. We just need to help you feel safe enough to use it.
I love that. My last thought is, this podcast exists because I refused to let fear be the last word. I froze. I was embarrassed. I said, I am a person to a job interviewer. And I kept going. And here I am. And here you are. And we are going to figure this out together. Okay, before we go, I have a little challenge for you. And I really, really want you to do this one. This week, just this week, I want you to have one conversation in English. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be perfect. It could be ordering a coffee. It could be writing a comment on this video. It could be saying hello to someone in English. And when you do it, notice what happens in your body. Notice the alarm, and then notice that you survived. Because you will. You always do.
And if you want to share your experience, we would absolutely love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell us. What is your moment? The moment your English shut down when you needed it most. We read every single comment, and you might just help someone else feel less alone.
Because that is what this community is about. We are not here to be perfect. We are here to be brave, together. If this episode resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find us. And subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. We are just getting started, and I promise you, it only gets better from here. I'm Vivi.
And I'm Robert.
And this is Speak with Vivi. We'll see you next week. Take care of yourselves and keep going, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.